Hi, my name is Sage Foley and I'm a designer, stylist, and seamstress that works in film, fashion, and theater. So today we are going to be continuing on with our pattern drafting series, and we are going to be moving away from bodices and towards a different garment, pants. About 2 years ago, I decided to get rid of all of the pants in my closet that weren't high-waisted. There were a couple reasons that I did this, but really it's because for me, high-waisted pants are the most flattering and also the most comfortable. Unfortunately, however, most of the high-waisted pants in my collection are actually vintage because modern high-waisted pants actually aren't truly high-waisted, especially not on me. Because I'm so tall, most ready-to-wear pants now only come up to like my high hip and maybe the bottom of my belly button at best. And if I can find a pair of pants that do hit me at my natural waist, there's usually not a ton of options there. So there will only be like one color or one style. And really, I want to fill my closet with every color I can of high-waisted pants. I love them. So I would get to kill two birds with one stone, continuing on with this pattern drafting series and hopefully getting closer to making my dream pant sloper. Pants can notoriously be difficult to draft. It can be difficult to get the perfect fitting pair of pants. And so I think that this is going to be a really good practice to put these three systems to the test. Today, I'm going to be drafting pant slopers with 3 different pattern drafting systems. Patternmaking for fashion design by Helen Joseph Armstrong, Patternmaking by Dennic Chunman Lo, and metric pattern cutting for womenswear by Winifred Aldrich. For ease, I will be referring to these systems by their authors' last names, Armstrong, Chunman Lo, and Aldrich. In my first pattern drafting video, I know that I referred to the Armstrong and Chunman Lo systems by the authors' first names, Helen and Dennic, but I am going to be switching to last names from here on out and for every future pattern making video that I make. Let's start by looking at each book's section on pants. The Armstrong system, as its size would suggest, has a lot of information on drafting different styles of pants. On the first page of the section, it gives a quick introduction and history lesson. There are pages on terminology, a summary of different pant foundations, there's a page on taking measurements for your pant draft, instructions on how to draft the different foundations, and how to adjust the various foundations for the different styles. And of course, at the very end, there is a page on how to address fit issues. This book has a lot of information and is a good resource to have on your shelf, especially if you want to understand the ins and outs of pattern cutting. The Chunman Lo book is quite a bit smaller than the Armstrong book, and its section on pants definitely holds true to that. It starts with a basic introduction and then it immediately goes into the key measurement chart and an explanation of each of the key measurements and how much ease needs to be added to them and why. This is nice if you like understanding the mechanics of pattern drafting a little bit more. The book then goes into the actual drafting instructions, which comprise the rest of the pant section of the book. As with the bodice sloper section, I find a section on addressing fit issues to be missing, which I do think is a problem, especially when it comes to drafting pants, as they can be especially finicky to get fitted properly. I do, however, want to make a quick correction to my last video in which I said there wasn't any pages in this book dedicated to measurement taking instructions. They are, which is great, and you can find those instructions on the very last 2 pages of the book. Finally, let's take a look at the Aldrich system. I feel as though we've been moving from large to small as far as the sizes of the books go. This book is definitely the smallest, but I do feel as though its section on pants has slightly more information in it than the Lo book did. Something that you will immediately notice is that the necessary measurements, instructions, and diagram for each sloper type are reserved to 2 pages, which is much more compact than the other 2 systems. There are measurement diagrams and charts at the beginning of the book as opposed to specialized version in each section, and similarly, it has one communal section on addressing fit issues for all of the garment types that the book covers throughout. So let's get started. As always, I start by looking at the required measurements for each system and preparing my measurement sheets. Of course, in the case of the Aldrich system, I will convert all of my measurements from inches to centimeters. I did want to mention the app that I use to do conversions and to easily divide up measurements. This especially comes in handy when you're working in inches. It is called Measure Master Pro, and I have been using it for the past couple of years. The Armstrong system needed a bit more complicated measurements such as waist and hip arc, while the other two systems stuck with largely the same set of measurements. As usual, they all had slightly different names for the different measurements you need. I didn't actually have to take any more measurements after I had gotten my sheet done for the Armstrong pattern, as it comprised all of the measurements needed for the other two systems as well. Now I can start drafting. Let's begin with the Armstrong system. Feel free to sympathize with me as I had to tape a bunch of papers together because I keep forgetting to order a roll of cheap patterning paper and I don't want to use my nice cardstock. Don't worry though, any cut-off scraps are recycled. The instructions for the Armstrong system were simple and I like the step-by-step diagrams. It uses a point A to B format, which always takes out a lot of the guesswork. Something that I like is that the instructions include drafting in the grain line. Not all pattern drafting systems include this step, but I think it comes in handy when you're going to cut out the fabric. It takes away having to figure out your grain line later on, but this is especially important in pants because it's going to prevent your pant leg from twisting around. Having a really straight grain line and having kind of a center line down a pant is going to make sure it's nice and straight as it hangs on the body. Today I was really struggling with drawing curves for some reason. Some days it comes super easily and you can just freehand perfect curves, but other days it doesn't come as naturally. I even pulled out my French curve set, which I actually really don't like because I find that they're too small to draw good curves for the body. If anyone has a French curve ruler that they really love and would recommend to me, I would greatly appreciate it. This system does have you walk and true your pant pattern before it is considered to be done. This basically just balances your inseam and your outseam. The instructions for this are a couple pages back from the initial drafting instructions, but I am very happy that this is included as I do think it's an important step when drafting a pant. And finally, here you can see the final Armstrong pant pattern pieces. They are hard to get in frame all at once as they're so long, but on first glance, it does seem that they will properly go to my natural waist, which I'm really excited about. Next, the Chunman Lo system. I had a lot of the same problems when drafting the pant sloper with this system as I did when I used this system to draft a bodice block. I still think that the way that the instructions are written is unnecessarily complicated. They are written using a set of sample measurements. I found I had to frequently switch back to the sample measurement chart to see if the numbers being referenced in the instructions needed to be substituted with my own measurements or if they were universal measurements. Also mixed in were different calculations you had to do. So in all, there were a lot of numbers that needed to be sorted through to make sure that you were drafting the pants correctly. I found that this made the drafting process take longer with the Chunman Lo system than it did with the Armstrong and Aldrich systems. Another thing to note is that the instructions in this system are written in paragraphs, which is both a good and a bad thing. It's good because you get more in-depth explanations on why you're doing each step, but bad because it isn't as simple to find your place and continue on to the next step if you need to look away from where you were. And here are the final pieces for the Chunman Lo system. And now finally, the Aldrich system. This system is written in very concise instructions and uses a point A to B method like the Armstrong system. Because of the simple instruction setup, it was very fast to draft. The major downside of this system's process is that you draft the front pattern piece before the back, unlike the Chunman Lo and Armstrong systems where you draft both pattern pieces at the same time. The biggest downside of this is that I actually had to cut out the finished front piece and then tape my paper back together, trying to line up my frame measurements as best as I could. And then I had to go back in and actually redo some of the steps from the front pattern piece so that I had those measurements to reference and build off of for my back pattern piece. You could probably just draft one piece right on top of the other if you were planning on using a tracing wheel, but I don't usually prefer that method, so I did have to take the time to transfer over some of those measurements. And here you can see the final pattern pieces for the Aldrich system. After I was done with drafting, I of course went in and notched and punched all of my darts. Now let's compare the flat patterns to one another. From left to right, we have Armstrong, Chunman Lo, and Aldrich. The front pattern piece of each system is on the left, and the back pattern piece is on the right. Right away, the most obvious difference is the orientation of the pattern pieces. Another obvious difference is the darts. The Armstrong and Chunman Lo front pieces both have 2 darts, while the Aldrich system only has 1. Other than that, and some minor differences in volume and curve shapes, really they all look very similar in shape and length. Next, I cut all of the pieces out of muslin, of course paying special attention to the grain and making sure to mark my darts and seam allowances. I am not adding any allowance to the waist or the hem so that I can see where those will hit on my body. I then serge all of the edges to prevent fraying and stitch up all of the darts. I then stitch up all my seams, leaving a couple of inches at the top of one of my side seams to put a centered zipper in. After the zippers are in, it's time for a fit test. Here I wanted to actually try on one of my favorite fitting pair of pants so that you can see the fit of them and how the fit of the slopers compare. Please ignore the wrinkles. I'm working on replacing the lining in these, so they've been a bit crumpled. One thing to note is that this pair of pants has some tapering down the leg, while the other 3 pairs are just going to be straight. So now let's look at the pants that I just made. Let's start with the Armstrong. Of course, my initial thought here is that they are too big, which is honestly what I was expecting from all 3 of these systems, as usually I have to adjust first drafts of any sloper down to be a bit smaller to fit me. The pants do lay flat when I'm standing straight with not a lot of wrinkling, which is what you're looking for. However, I think that the crotch is way too low, and I think that the extension on the back crotch is slightly too long, which contributes to these pants looking oversized on me. I think this would need to be adjusted if I were to take in any volume on the sides, because if it weren't adjusted, it might cause some wrinkling. Now the Chunman Lo pants. These pants are a much better fit than the Armstrong system. The crotch level is just about at the right spot. It isn't nearly as low. The waist also fits me just as I like a waist to fit. The waist on the Armstrong system was definitely too big. The front also lays pretty flat, which can be hard to see as the fabric itself is a little bit wrinkly, but I do think I'm seeing a slight wrinkle at the crotch level, which I would initially attempt to fix by truing up my inseams and outseams, which it is important to note that this system and the Aldrich system didn't have me true my seams. If I was still seeing this problem after that, I would probably then start to alter the shape of the curve. I think part of the reason why pants can be hard to get a perfect fit on is because there really are so many different ways you can adjust that curve that you see. You know, you can shorten it, you can make it more steep, you can make it more shallow, and doing all of these little changes will make changes throughout the whole garment, which can throw something else off kilter. So they can be finicky, especially that curve can be finicky. So seeing wrinkling in that area on your first draft isn't to be unexpected. It's not crazy that that's happening, but it is something that you want to get rid of in your final sloper because it's something that you don't want in your final garment. I do think that the Chunman Lo sloper needs far fewer adjustments than the Armstrong sloper does. Finally, the Aldrich sloper. These pants are also a much better fit than the Armstrong system, and I find that they fit similarly to the Chunman Lo pants. The waist fits me much better, and of course the crotch isn't crazy low like the Armstrong system. However, I'm still seeing this problem of wrinkling at the crotch as I was seeing in the Chunman Lo pants. I have inserted a close-up of my favorite pair of pants for comparison. As you can see, they are completely flat, even if you pull at the sides, and even the Armstrong system wasn't this flat. This is the kind of balance you want, which can be hard to achieve when drafting a pant pattern. As I said earlier with the Chunman Lo system, what I would probably do to fix this Aldrich sloper would be initially truing up my inseams and my outseams, and from there I would adjust the shape of the curve. So here are my final thoughts. Despite the Chunman Lo system having the most complicated instructions, I do actually think it resulted in the best fit. I would then put the Aldrich system in second place and the Armstrong system in third. As always, the biggest thing to keep in mind is that these first drafts are simply jumping off points and will rarely result in perfect fits on the first try. Everybody's bodies are so different, and making a pattern drafting system that will universally and perfectly fit everybody's body proportions on the first try is virtually impossible. Of course, we can get close, and that's kind of what I'm seeing, which system gets the closest, but expecting these systems to make you the perfect draft just based off of your measurements is kind of impossible. You should always expect that there will be fittings and adjustments made to your patterns, and always expect to do lots of mock-ups if you want a perfect fitting garment at the end. If I were going to be using the Chunman Lo system to draft a lot of different patterns for a lot of different people's measurements, I would actually probably rewrite the instructions for myself so that it was in a more straightforward A to B point system as opposed to the way that it's formatted now. In the case of making the perfect pair of high-waisted pants for myself, I think I'm going to take the Chunman Lo sloper as a base, and then I'm going to take some of the pants from my closet and make flat patterns based off of those and kind of combine those two together to create the perfect sloper for myself. I am going to be making a video on that process because I do think also showing how you can make flat patterns out of existing garments is really interesting and good information to have, so that will be coming very, very soon. I hope that this video was helpful for anybody looking to draft a pant sloper for themselves or for anybody who is just wanting to try out a new pattern drafting system. Of course, you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Fully Dressed, and I'll see you guys soon.